Ya, cek dulu. Oke, play. Ya.
Ladies and gentlemen, the opening ceremony is going to start in a few minutes. First of all, I would like to read the rules of the conference. Third International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020 rules. First, participants are expected to join the Zoom meeting 10 minutes prior to the start of the e-conference. Second, participants should wear formal attire. Third, participants are required to use the registered name. Fourth, rename your Zoom account based on the following this format: name underscore institution. Fifth, participants are required to turn off their microphone. Sixth, participants could write their question anytime during the session in chat box. Seventh, the question shall be sent to the committee privately. Eight, question could be written in Bahasa Indonesia or English. Ninth, e-certificate will be sent to participants' email within a week. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Rector of Universitas Negeri Malang, Profesor Dr. Haji Ahmad Rofiuddin, MPD. The Vice Rector of Universitas Negeri Malang. The keynote speakers, Juliari Peter Batubara, MBA, Minister of Social Affairs Indonesia. Associated Professor Haris Abdul Wahab, University of Malaya, Malaysia. Associated Professor Chang Chiu Hung, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Dr. Muhammad Alif Haji Sismat, University Islam Sultan Syarif Ali, Brunei Darussalam. And Professor Dr. Yazid Bastomi, MA, from Universitas Negeri Malang, Indonesia. The chairperson of International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020, Dr. Joko Sayono, MPD, MHUM, and all the presenters and participants of International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020. We are delighted to welcome you all to the third International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020. With the theme Community Empowerment through Research, Innovation, and Open Access. This conference is an international seminar that is held regularly every 2 years by the Research and Community Service Institute for the State University of Malang. This activity aims to gather academics from various research institutes and university to discuss the theoretical and practical development of the social sciences and humanities in Indonesia and other countries, as well as building academic network. Nowadays, we all been affected by the COVID-19 outbreak, and this changed how we live as a human being. Various action has been taken to prevent the spread of the virus. So in this special occasion, we changed the oral presentation to remote presentation through video conference. It's such a great honor for me, Hawi Kiranalia, as a master of ceremony on today's event. And I appreciate you all to join us today on Wednesday, 28th of October 2020, live on YouTube. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start the event, let me inform the general agenda of today's event. First, opening. Second, singing Indonesia's national anthem. Third, introduction and report from the chairperson of International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020. Fourth, opening speech by the rector of Universitas Negeri Malang. Fifth, photo session. Sixth, plenary session. Seventh, break. Eighth, parallel session. Ninth, closing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of today's agenda. We will rise and sing our national anthem of Indonesia Raya. To all participants, please rise. Thank you. To all participants, please sit down. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we gladly invite the chairperson of International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020 to deliver the report. Please welcome Dr. Joko Sayono, MPD MHUM.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to our Honorable Rector Universitas Negeri Malang, Professor Dr. Haji Ahmad Wahid MPD, our Honorable Institute for Research on Community Engagement, Professor Dr. Markus Giambaro, our Honorable Keynote Speaker, Bapak Yuan Peter Batubara MPE, Minister of Social Affairs of Indonesia, Professor Haris Abdul Wahab from Universitas Malaya, Professor Chang Cho Hong from Nanyang Technology University, Singapore, Dr. Muhammad Ali Haji Sipat from Sultan Sharif Ali Islamic University, Brunei Darussalam, and Professor Dr. Yazid Bustami from Universitas Negeri Malang, and all present and participants. First and foremost, let us praise the Almighty God who has picked over us to hear the opportunities and happiness and the pleasure that we feel today. On behalf of the Chief of the Committee, I would like to present my great pleasure to welcome all the presenters and the participants, especially for the dedicated speaker for the third International Conference of Unities of Social Science. Thank you very much for coming today. Ladies and gentlemen, I see ICHSS is a beneficial conference that will provide a forum about social sciences and unit issues for researchers, academicians, professional students from all over the world, and for another various perspective. This conference is held a stem of community empowerment through research, innovation, and open access. We aim to provide a platform where all people who are involved can present the research insight, share ideas, experiences, expertise, and educational practice knowledge, and as facilitate an institution or organization to build a network for a better future development. This conference is attended by various universities from all over Indonesia and some other countries. The committee received 135 abstract and more than 35 full paper. After peer review process, the abstract paper will be submitted to the Social Sciences Administration, which is published by CRC Balkema and indexed by Web of Science. I also would like present to my credit for the committee for the very heart of the conference. For your information, the conference is brought to you by Social Units and Tourism Center, Institutions and Community Engines, Universitas Negeri Malang. Therefore, I also would like to express my gratitude to the Universitas Negeri Malang for the tremendous support for this conference. Dear ladies and gentlemen, that was all what I can say. I wish success for all you. Please kindly forgive for every possible shortcoming in this conference and my mistake, but it was ended. And Zuban, again, it's my pleasure to welcome every one of you. Thank you for being here and please enjoy the conference. Lastly, with much honor, I would like to call upon Professor Dr. Ahmad Rafiuddin, Rector of Universitas Negeri Malang, to say a few words for welcoming all the participants on opening this conference. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Joko Sayono, for the report on this wonderful occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, we move to the next agenda, that is opening speech. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Haji Ahmad Rafiuddin, MPD, to deliver the opening speech and officially open this day's conference. Please welcome Professor Dr. Haji Ahmad Rafiuddin, MPD.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi and good morning, everyone. Dear distinguished keynote speaker, presenter, and all participants, firstly, allow us to pray and thanks unto our God, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the only God who has been giving us some mercies and through blessing, so we can attend and together in this area in excellent condition and delight circumstance. Valuable keynote speaker, the Excellency Bapak Yuliari Peter Batrubara MBA, the Minister of Social Affairs, Republic Indonesia. Thanks for your kind opportunity join us in this conference. Dr. Muhammad Ali Haji Sismat from University Islam Sultan Sharif Ali, Brunei Darussalam. Associate Professor Haris Abdul Wahab, University of Malaya, Malaysia. Associate Professor Chang Chu Hung from Nanyang Technological University. Welcome to you all in our online conference. And Professor Dr. Yazid Bastami from Universitas Negeri Malang. Ladies and gentlemen, the International Conference of Humanities and Social Science is an international conference held regularly biannually by the Institute of Research and Community Engagement of the Universitas Negeri Malang. This activity aims to discuss the theoretical and practical development of the social science and humanities in Indonesia and other countries in various fields to build academic network when gathering academic from various research institutes and universities. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of community empowerment is a trigger to increase community independence in the challenge of rapid development of technology. One important thing in the community empowerment effort is to link innovation, research, and benefit community empowerment. The result of a research should not only be limited to publication in the academic environment. Open access to various forms of existing literacy is one requirement for innovative research to develop optimally. Therefore, this conference is also expected to be an excellent forum to socialize the work from various parts of the country, discuss with each other, and find solutions to current social and humanities issues. Besides, this forum is aim to build cooperation and synergy in the creative idea for mutual work to implement joint research. Therefore, in this third conference, the committee promote suitable theme of community empowerment through research, innovation, and open access. Finally, I strongly encourage you to take benefit as much as possible from the great conference by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm pleased to declare that the International Conference on Humanities and Social Science officially open. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for the warm opening on this greatest event. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now officially start the International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2020. Before we are going to the next agenda, we would like to invite all participants to do a photo sessions. I want to ask the participants that sign in Zoom to turn on the camera. Because of this kind of situation, we will take an online photo session. So please, for all participants, to turn on the camera and Zoom. Okay, I think everybody is ready. And make a good pose for everyone. Thank you very much. Before we start the plenary session, I would like to inform all the participants to turn on the camera and mute the audio during the plenary session. Don't forget, if you have any question, you could write on the chat room following this format. Name, underscore institution, underscore question for whom, and underscore the questions. And now is the time for the next session. It's the keynote speech. Now, I would like to hand over this forum to the moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Rahmati Putri Yaniafari.
Thank you so much, DNC. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Rahmati, your moderator for today's session. We will have several speakers, 5 speakers in today's plenary session. The first, we're going to listen to the speech by the Minister of Social Affairs, and then we're going to have the first plenary session with 2 speakers followed by Q&A session. And then we'll move to the second plenary session with 2 speakers followed by another Q&A session. But before the plenary session starts, we're going to have 5 minutes break. So enjoy the break, everyone. In 5 minutes, I will be back with the plenary session. Thank you.
Sudah beralih.
Universitas Negeri Malang, yang biasa disebut dengan UM, lahir pada tahun 1954 dan memiliki 3 kampus. Kampus 1 bertempat di pusat kota Malang. Kampus 2 terletak di sebelah timur kota Malang. Sedangkan kampus 3 bertempat di pusat kota Blitar. Sebagai salah satu LPTK di Indonesia, UM, Universitas Negeri Malang, tetap berkomitmen untuk mencetak pahlawan tanpa tanda jasa dan tenaga ahli berdedikasi tinggi, unggul, dan berkualitas.
Merawat keindonesiaan kita. Di palung sanubari, kita harus telaten dan penuh kecintaan merawat keindonesiaan kita. Merawat kesadaran keindonesiaan kita, ibarat melayarkan bahtera raksasa, serupa bahtera Nuh dahulu kala. Ke tengah samudra luas tak terkira yang menaklukkan segala pandang mata dan mencipta utopia kaki-kaki lengkung cakrawala yang menjanjikan mata termana selain selalu tertarik dengan segala gelombang badai yang acap sukar diduga dasar atau nikmatnya. Kita harus rajin mengubah-ubah arah layar agar bahtera keindonesiaan kita serupa bahtera Nuh dahulu kala bisa maju menuju dermaga tujuan bernegara dan berbangsa.
Perjuangan bangsa Indonesia bukan hanya pada masa lalu, hari ini, hari esok, dan selamanya. Perjuangan kita sebagai pencetak pahlawan tanpa tanda jasa belumlah berakhir.
Saudara bangsa dan tanah air, kobarkan semangat juang, seolah darah kita bergejolak. Jadikanlah warna merah sebagai beranimu dan warna putih sebagai sucimu, karena merah putih itu jiwamu. Berjuang mencerdaskan kehidupan bangsa adalah tugas kita semua. Saat ini, perjuangan bukan tentang pertumpahan darah di medan perang, tetapi pertarungan kualitas sumber daya manusia, ilmu pengetahuan, dan teknologi.
Merdeka adalah merdeka, tidak dijajah dan berdiri di atas kaki sendiri. Merdeka dalam berkarya, merdeka dalam belajar, dan merdeka dalam berkehidupan dengan sesama.
Indonesia adalah negara besar dengan mimpi yang besar. Mari kita wujudkan dengan tekad dan langkah besar. Peringatan kemerdekaan membangkitkan semangat juang untuk pengabdian abadi yang melintasi zaman. Dirgahayu Republik Indonesia.
Berjuang demi negara, berjuang demi bangsa, dan berjuang demi seluruh rakyat Indonesia. Untuk Indonesia maju. Merdeka!
Merdeka! Merdeka! Merdeka! Merdeka! Merdeka!
Menteri.
Assalamualaikum.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the plenary session, and once again, welcome to ICHSS 2020. As I told you earlier that in this plenary session, we're going to have 5 speakers. The first one is Mr. Juliari Peter Batubara, MBA, which is the Minister of Social Affairs Indonesia. And we're going to listen to the other 4 presentations from the 4 keynote speakers from 4 different countries. So we are very honored today. So first, ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to the speech by the Minister of Social Affairs, Mr. Juliari Peter Barbara, MBA. Mr. Juliari Peter Barbara, MBA, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua dan selamat pagi. Yang saya hormati Rektor Universitas Negeri Malang, Profesor Dr. A.H. Rofiuddin MPD, Ketua LP2M, Kepala Pusat Sosial, Humaniora, dan Pariwisata Universitas Negeri Malang, Ibu Bapak hadirin sekalian yang berbahagia. Puji syukur kita panjatkan kehadiran Tuhan Yang Maha Kuasa, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, karena atas limpahan rahmat dan karunia-Nya kita masih diberikan kesehatan dan kekuatan sehingga kita semua bisa hadir dalam acara seminar internasional dengan tema pemberdayaan komunitas melalui riset, inovasi, dan keterbukaan akses di Universitas Negeri Malang. Pada kesempatan ini saya mengajak kepada seluruh yang hadir di sini agar dimanapun, kapanpun, dan dalam kondisi apapun agar dapat terus menjalankan protokol kesehatan dalam rangka penanganan pandemi COVID-19. Guna mencegah pandemi COVID-19 ini, kita harus selalu dapat membiasakan menerapkan perilaku 3M, yaitu memakai masker, mencuci tangan dengan sabun, dan menjaga jarak serta menghindari kerumunan. Marilah kita sama-sama saling mendoakan agar kita mendapat perlindungan untuk tetap berada dalam kondisi yang sehat dan terhindar dari penularan virus corona. Bapak Rektor, Ibu Bapak dan hadirin yang berbahagia, saya atas nama Kementerian Sosial Republik Indonesia mengucapkan selamat kepada seluruh jajaran Universitas Negeri Malang yang telah berhasil menyelenggarakan seminar internasional pada kegiatan yang ketiga ini. Semoga Ibu Bapak sekalian senantiasa dapat terus berinovasi sebagai upaya berkontribusi dalam pembangunan kesejahteraan sosial di negeri kita tercinta ini. Tema pemberdayaan komunitas pasti berguna untuk diseminarkan. Pada dasarnya, tujuan dari pemberdayaan adalah memperkuat kekuasaan masyarakat, khususnya kelompok lemah yang memiliki ketidakberdayaan baik karena kondisi internal maupun karena kondisi eksternal, misalnya seperti ditindas oleh struktur sosial yang tidak adil. Kelompok lemah ini sebagai wujud nyata yang perlu dilakukan perubahan, seperti kelompok masyarakat kelas ekonomi sosial rendah, kelompok minoritas etnis, kelompok wanita, kelompok lanjut usia, kelompok disabilitas. Keadaan dan perilaku mereka yang berbeda dari keumuman kerap kali dipandang sebagai penyimpang. Mereka seringkali kurang dihargai, bahkan dicap sebagai orang-orang yang malas, lemah, yang disebabkan oleh dirinya sendiri. Padahal, boleh jadi ketidakberdayaan mereka seringkali merupakan akibat dari adanya kekurangadilan dan diskriminasi dalam aspek-aspek kehidupan tertentu. Hadirin sekalian yang berbahagia, kondisi kemiskinan ekstrim saat ini yang menjadi target perubahan adalah kurang lebih sebanyak 9,9 juta jiwa atau 3,371% dari penduduk Indonesia, di mana diharapkan pada tahun 2024 nanti dapat bisa berada pada posisi 0%. Dari data tersebut, upaya yang dilakukan untuk mencapai keberdayaan masyarakat atau yang sering disebut sebagai Empowerment Index, yaitu mendorong SDM kesejahteraan sosial yang unggul, kompeten, akses program-program pemberdayaan sosial yang kolaboratif dan dinamis, dapat membangun kesadaran masyarakat untuk senantiasa mampu bertindak bagi perubahan. Di antara program-program pemberdayaan yang dapat diakses masyarakat adalah kewirausahaan sosial, pemberdayaan komunitas adat terpencil, pemberdayaan pilar-pilar sosial, dan restorasi sosial. Dari capaian akses program pemberdayaan tersebut, diharapkan adanya perubahan dengan ketercapaian Empowerment Index, yaitu kebebasan mobilitas, kemampuan membeli komoditas kecil, kemampuan membeli komoditas besar, terlibat dalam pembuatan keputusan-keputusan rumah tangga, kebebasan relatif dari dominasi keluarga, kesadaran hukum dan politik, serta keterlibatan dalam kampanye pembangunan kesejahteraan sosial. Ibu bapak hadirin yang berbahagia, saya berharap seminar internasional ini dapat memberikan kontribusi dan pemikiran ilmiah, khususnya untuk perubahan di masyarakat terkait dengan analisis kebijakan, pengembangan model pelayanan di bidang kesejahteraan sosial, dan penyediaan SDM kesejahteraan sosial yang unggul sangat kami perlukan, sehingga arah dan kebijakan Kementerian Sosial dalam mencapai kondisi keberfungsian sosial dan kesejahteraan sosial bagi seluruh masyarakat Indonesia mengacu kepada dasar teori dan kajian akademik yang akuntabel. Demikian beberapa pemikiran yang dapat saya berikan pada kesempatan berbahagia ini. Semoga bermanfaat untuk perubahan masyarakat yang berdaya. Terima kasih atas perhatian semuanya. Saya akhiri, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much to the Minister of Social Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, now we'll move to the first plenary session. As I told you earlier, today we're going to have two keynote speakers presenting in the first plenary session. For one speaker, the time will be 30 minutes. And then after two speakers' presentation, we're going to have Q&A session for both two speakers. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the first speaker of this session will be Dr. Muhammad Ali Haji Susmat from University Islam Sultan Syarif Ali Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Muhammad Alif, are you with us already?
Oh, yes, yeah. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Muhammad Alif will present a paper entitled Empowering Translation Students Through the Use of Digital Technologies. Well, the operator, could you please show us the CV? The CV of Dr. Muhammad Alif. Okay, here it is. So, as I told you earlier, Dr. Muhammad Alif Haji Susmat is faculty members in University Islam Sultan Syarif Ali Brunei Darussalam. And the academic qualification, he pursued a BA in University of Brunei Darussalam and then MA in University of Leeds, United Kingdom. And for the doctoral degree, he pursued the doctoral degree in University of Leeds, so the same university in the same country for MA and PhD. For the areas of expertise, he is really interested in translation, technology, linguistics, Arabic, English, second language acquisition, and computer-assisted translation tools. For the funded projects, the first one is inverse translation quality, a comparative analysis of document translation and post-editing. The second one is neural and statistical machine translation, a comparative error analysis. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Muhammad Alif ICHSS. Dr. Muhammad Alif, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Should I share my presentation slides or?
It's already in the screen.
Oh, it's already in the screen because I can't see it.
The operator will share it for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. A very good morning to everyone. I am Dr. Muhammad Ali from University Islam Sultan Sharif Ali, UNISA from Brunei, specializing in translation and technology. I hope everyone is doing well and stay safe in these very sad times. And let's hope the pandemic subside as soon as possible. Okay, so the topic today is related to more to my field and to the theme of this conference. It is to empowering transition students through the use of digital technologies. So the word empowerment or empower is a powerful word which may imply different meanings depending on the context. So Cambridge Dictionary defined the term as to give someone official authority or the freedom to do something. If the word students are put into context, it generally means that to authorize the students to do something. However, this definition remains ambiguous or vague and may be misinterpreted because authorizing or giving students power to do anything they want, it might not be a good idea. And then I think a more accurate definition for this study is according to Collins Dictionary. To empower someone means to give them the means to achieve something. So which means this definition is more suitable. It's more suitable for this studies context, as it intends to investigate how digital technologies can empower transition students. So not just academically, so how do you like to equip the students after they graduated? So and then Lightfoot, according to Lightfoot, mentioned 4 elements in decision making when defining empowerment. It is autonomy, which means independence, choice, responsibility, and participation. These 4 elements are crucial and suitable when empowering students in a learning environment. Even though they are free, even though the students are free and encouraged to make decisions for themselves, they must be responsible for every action they make. Moving on to the next slide. Why do we need technology? Why do we need digital technologies, and how can they empower translation students? So this goes back to what's happening in the translation industry right now. So over the past decade, there are significant changes in the translation industry as the demands of translation and localization services have been increasing. So it's been rapidly growing. So these demands have led to the importance of producing good translation, good quality translations in a very limited time. Usually it's very quick, it's a very short time. As a result, there has been a shift in the translation profession. It now requires technological or technical skills to meet the increasing demands of clients. So this is where technology come in handy. other than knowledge of translation methods and strategies, professional translators now also required to have technological skills. So there would be having technological skills would be an advantage for professional translators nowadays, because they become more marketable in the industry, and this is what we would like to equip the current students when they graduate. Moving on to the next slide. Um, machine translation is one of the translation technology used at the moment. Since it was first introduced in 1954, it was just a basic machine translation that translate Russian into English, and it was part of the Georgetown University, a collaboration, an experiment, a collaboration between Georgetown University and IBM company. And after a while, after that, it stopped for a while because they hit a dead end. And then later, sometime in late 1970s and early 80s, studies on MT revived, and then several MT systems such as Sistran and Logos emerged for general application, even though the dictionaries they use were modified for specific subject areas. And now, from rule-based, when it was 6 decades ago, they used rule-based, and now they incorporated artificial intelligence, and now they're using neural approach, which is called neural machine translation, which you usually now can use online, such as Google Translate and Microsoft Bing, and other than that. And now the MT systems can translate over 100 languages, which is very handy. But the quality of these translations differ. It varies depending on the language pairs, the text types, and other factors. Next slide is about another well-known translation technology called computer-assisted translation, or in short, we call it CAT tools. The first CAT tool was introduced in the 90s, in the early 90s, which was called Trados, which is now actually known as SDL Trados because it was acquired by a company called SDL. And then typically, CAT tool has translation memory, features such as translation memory, which is used to save all the translations you use, and then you can easily retrieve all the translation when you're translating similar text. And then there's terminology management as well, where you can use as glossaries or dictionaries if you want. And then alignment is where you want to put previous translations that's already translated prior to use the CAT tool, so you can just insert in the system. And then nowadays, most CAT tools have machine translation, and they use cloud-based systems. Okay, next slide. So the CAT tools, machine translation, as time changed, CAT tools, these upgrades have increased, the advancements of translation technologies have increased quality and productivity of translators, and attitudes towards these technologies have also changed, because it also changed the industry as well. And then post editing is the new normal, where you retrieve raw material, raw machine translation, and edit it afterwards, and it makes the translation process faster, but it requires linguistic skills as well, to ensure the quality of the translations. And then so post editing, CAT tools, and empty machine translation are integral parts of translator training and professional setting. Moving on to the next slide. So the current COVID-19 pandemic has also impacted the translation and language industry, as it had forced more translators to work remotely from, even though before there are many freelance translators working from home, but now we see more translators work from home. However, this is not really a new normal for freelance translators. And then we see translators who have technological skills remain on the top. The pandemic has also changed the content to be translated. For example, media contents on various platforms, such as Netflix, YouTube, and social media, have quickly attracted more users, as people stay at home due to movement restriction order and lockdown since March 2020 for most countries. The surge in the number of online users has led to translating a more considerable amount of media content, and there's also e-learning as well. Although although there's a lot of e-learning material available currently online, but it is mostly available only mostly in the English language. Therefore, for online educators, they need these materials to be translated into their language. And then socially, more established terms, existing terms, have also emerged and become commonly used in the new normal, such as, well, I will give some examples later on. And then also there are coronavirus neologisms. Neologisms are usually used to describe new coin words, new made-up words. Moving on to the next slide. So these are examples of existing or established terms. For example, coronavirus was first used in 1968 during the H3N2 virus pandemic, and the self-quarantine term was used during an outbreak of bubonic plague in the 17th century. And then, next slide. And then neologisms, there are a few words that have emerged as well, such as coronials. So before we have millennials, now we have coronials. Coronials are used to describe generation born during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then also, excuse me for my language, is covidiot. Covidiot is a combination of COVID and idiot, which usually is used to describe people who break the government guidelines in combating the COVID-19 crisis. And then there's also infodemic. Infodemic is also a new coin word, which is a combination of information and pandemic. Is used to tell the spread of information that causes speculations, panic, or anxiety. And then to the next slide. So for this for this study, the question is, what are the transition students' attitudes towards the use of digital technologies, and how can these digital technologies empower the students' learning process? Moving on. So for this study, a group of 21 final year undergraduate students of UNISA participated. It's actually conducted in one of the modules they took, and they are Malay native speakers. Typically, in the translation modules, they translate between 3 languages: Malay, Arabic, and English. And most all these students learned Arabic and English for more than 12 years. So they also previously, in the previous semesters, they studied basic knowledge of translation methods and strategies. And then for the translation projects, so one in the projects, there were 2 types of projects: social media translation and subtitling. So they did 6 projects within 12 weeks. So three projects on social media translation and 3 subtitling projects. So every week they have different roles: project manager, translator, and proofreader. So for the tasks in these projects, the project manager usually finds suitable files for the projects, and then present the final products at the end of each in every 2 weeks. And then the translator would typically translate and submit a report, and except for in the subtitling project, they typically transcribe first the videos and then translate the transcription, and then the proofreader will typically proofread the translation and submit a report. And sometimes they are, and then in the subtitling project, they are normally required to edit subtitles as well, but it's not compulsory. So it could be a teamwork effort. So for the digital technologies, for the social media translation, the students were allowed to choose any social media content. Most of them chose popular platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, mainly on advertisements, news, and entertainment. And then they use a cloud-based CAD tool called MemSource, which incorporates empty engines in the program. On the other hand, the subtitling tasks require them to use a free open source subtitle editor tool called Agisub, or however you pronounce it. And they also use a wide range of videos to be translated as and most of these videos come from YouTube and Facebook. Okay, next slide. Next slide, thank you. Okay, this is an example of how MemSource looks like. So typically it has translation memory used to translating new text and text alignments, and then there's term base to create glossary or dictionary if you want. and then machine translation. And they have a machine translation called MemSource Translate, which source using sources from Google Translate and Bing Translator. And the next slide is an example of how AGISA looks like. So this is one of their projects. And as you can see, they subtitled a video of a TV, I think it's an animated series, a very popular one called Doraemon, and they translated it to Malay. And then for the data analysis, I use a questionnaire and a report, and their report actually that they submitted in the projects. So in the questionnaire, it consists of 3 sections. Pardon?
You have 10 minutes left.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. There are 3 sessions: project information, and then social media translation, and subtitling. So for the project information, as you can see in the table, is regarding the contents translated in the social media translation projects and the preferred contents. So over 1/3, 8 out of 21 students translated news posts, while others translated infographics, advertisements, and healthcare posts. And then for the second question, most of them preferred the infographics because it consists of fascinating subject matters such as local economic developments and COVID-19 statistics, which is easy to understand. And for this question number 3, they were also asked similar questions. Next slide. Okay, question number 3. What are most of them? The table indicates that the students subtitle various videos such as comedy songs, cartoons, animation, trailers, others. And then seven of them, most of them chose comedy videos, saying that comedy videos are fun to translate. Therefore, it makes the subtitling processes less stressful. And then some of them chose cartoons because they had previously watched the films repeatedly when they were kids, so it's easy for them to translate it because they understood the content. So for the next slide, in response to question 5, most of them find difficulties in spotting and line break, where the spotting requires precision, and then line break is very limited, typically limited to 42 characters in 2 lines per subtitle, and sometimes it may require rephrasing, so it doesn't exceed the character limits. And then some of them also find transcription are difficult because it requires excellent listening skills. And then for the social media translation, most of them enjoyed the project, and a possible explanation for this may be related to the statement number 2, indicating that 18 out of 21 students found the social media contents are easy to translate, while the other 3 remain neutral. When I looked at the reports, some students stated that hashtags are move to the next slide. Okay, thank you. When I look at their report, some students stated that hashtags are tricky to translate, as the translation must also be as catchy as the original. And there is an example for this problem in the next slide. For example, the hashtag um, Banar Brunei. It's a Brunei word, Banar Brunei. It was challenging to translate to Arabic, uh, as it could mean Brunei al-Haqiqi in Arabic, or truly Brunei in English, and then Brunei Haqiqi, or true Brunei. But however, the translator chose the second one, as it is more suitable for the given context. So the next slide. In response to statement 3, most of the students agreed that MemSource is easy to use and suitable for translating social media contents, because CAT tools typically preserve the formatting of the file, so you don't have to worry about how the formatting is going to be in the translation in the final product. And then for statement number 4, most of them also agreed that the machine translations generated from MemSource Translate are editable and usable. And this result also supports the previous statement. So for the next slide, in response to statement number 5, most of the students agree that the contents influence their translation quality, as they stated in their report that it is easy for them to translate the exciting contents, and they must be knowledgeable of the subject matter. And then in response to question statement number 6, the projects, they all, most of them agreed that the projects improve their confidence in subtitling. They state that content and subject matter contribute to the improvement of their confidence level. And then similarly, in statement 7, most students agree that projects can encourage their creativity, suggesting that social media contents and translation projects can empower them. These exercises boost their confidence, creativity, and critical thinking skills as reflected in their reports. And then for the subtitle, in the next slide, for the subtitling project, students were asked similar questions. So most of them enjoyed, all of them actually enjoyed the project, and then they understood that the subtitling is most of them understood that subtitling is a delicate word which requires both translation and technical skills. Because, and then they also stated in their report that they help each other when facing difficulties such as transcription and subtitling, indicating their excellent teamwork skills. So in response to the next slide, in response to statement number 3, only 38.1%, pardon?
3 minutes left.
Okay. Only 38.1% agreed that MemSource is suitable for translating transcript. This is mostly due to the quality of the machine translation. It could not provide editable and usable translation for some contents, because some contents may contain idiomatic expressions and metaphors. In the next slide, I will give you an example of idiomatic expression they translated. For example, next slide. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. They translated into Malay, and MemSource translated rendered it as hujan, kucing, and anjing, which doesn't make any sense. And so the appropriate translation would be hujan turun dengan lebat. And another example is "you're a chicken" is a metaphor for a coward. So the machine translations rendered it as "awa ayam," which sounds funny in Malay. I think for most Malay, it sounds weird and funny. So the accurate, appropriate translation would be "awak pengecut." So for the next when asked about the easiness and suitability of the editing tool, 2/3 agreed to the statement, and because the shift times feature enhances the subtitling process, and the software interface is user-friendly and straightforward. And then most students also agree that the media content influences the quality of the subtitles because different types of content require different approaches to translating them, and some expression in some content require deeper understanding and knowledge of the equivalent terms and phrases in the target language and culture. And for statement number 6, the subtitling projects boosted their confidence as translators because even though it was challenging, but then they familiarized themselves with the tools, and the technical skills they acquired increased their confidence level and prepared them for professional settings. And then for the last statement, most students believe that the projects encourage their creativity reflected in their presentation skills. In addition to the main contents, project managers were very competitive actually in producing introduction videos as their creative way to introduce their projects and team members. The videos also surprisingly look professional and contain high quality. So for the conclusion, the overall findings suggest that digital technologies can empower translation students through translation projects to some extent. Despite facing some difficulties, students manage to use their critical thinking skills when carrying out the projects technically and linguistically. Based on the results, MemSource seems to be more suitable for translating social media contents than translating the video transcript due to the incapability of MemSource Translate in providing equivalent terms and phrases. And then the complexity of the content also influenced the quality of the final products. Apart from the equivalent issues, the contents also need to be interesting to make the translation and subtitling processes more fun and less stressful. As a result, most students also display positive attitudes towards digital content and technologies in social media translation and subtitling projects. They also feel more confident because because the projects prepared them with necessary skills to become professional translators and subtitlers. And surprisingly, the students also showed competitiveness and team spirit and teamwork skills mainly when presenting their projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alif. It's very interesting presentation. From the beginning, we listened to the explanation of how the pandemic has changed or shifted the translation process, and how there are so many coining or probably blending, and there are some new terms that emerged during this pandemic, like the word colonials or infodemic and some others which are quite new for me. And the project too, it looks really interesting. I bet that the students are really enjoying it, because that's also one of your findings, right? That the students enjoy the project. Yeah, because the projects or the objects that they are translating are very fun too, right? It's like film, social media, cartoon, and animation. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and all of the audience, if you have any questions, you can write it down in the chat box by writing your name, your institution, and the questions to whom you're asking the questions, whether it's to the first presenter or the second presenter. If you have any questions for Dr. Alif, later we're going to discuss after we listen to the second presentation. So the second presenter is Associate Professor Chang Chu Hong from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Professor Chang, are you here with us already?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, nice. Could you please show the CV, the operator? Thank you. Well, as I told you earlier, Associate Professor Chang Chu Hong is a faculty member of Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Next. The academic qualification, BA in National University of Singapore and US, and for MA and PhD in the same university, NTU. The areas of expertise, climate change education, applied climatology, and geography education, social sciences related to this. The funded projects, the recent one, climate change education, knowing, doing, and being, 2020, and for the next 2 years, till 2022. The second one, advancing a framework to describe school geography curricula around the world. And then the third one is developing learning progression for climate change in geography education. And Professor Chang will present a paper entitled Open Access for Humanities and Social Sciences Research. Well, Professor Chang, time is yours.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to clarify for this particular session, what time do I have? How much time do I have? Because I know that we have a second panel coming up in another maybe 25 minutes. So would you propose I speak for about 20 minutes and then we can get some questions?
Okay, 20 minutes then.
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers for making this possible. I was given a topic really on open access for humanities and social sciences research. I thought long and hard about what I could say, and I reflected on it from my vantage point as an editor of an international journal for geography education. So the journal is called International Research in Geographical and Environmental Education. The outline of my presentation is in the next slide. Do I have control of the slide or someone run through? Thank you so much. Right, so I'll be talking about some of the broad key features of open access and why it's so important for humanities and social sciences research, and then what are some implications for the scholar. In the next slide, you will see, next slide, please. Research is really about making the world a better place, right? I mean, while we dig our heads in, dig our heels in, and we collect data, we analyze data, and then we painstakingly furnish the data and present it in such a way that it's communicable and understandable to the general public. The main reason why we all do research is because we want to make the world a better place. Next slide, please. And open access is really one of the ways that could make this even easier. In the past, if you need to find new knowledge that has been created, you need to go into the library, go to the periodicals and journal section and leaf through the journals and look at it. I mean, I think by saying this, I can reveal how old I am. Those were the days when I did my early PhD work. I have to actually go to a physical library and go into the physical journals. But today, journals are widely available on the internet. However, they're not all free. And access to some colleagues in some parts of the world, as well as students, aspiring research students who may not have the resources, becomes an issue. So open access provides an alternative, a very viable alternative that allows more people to get to these works. But rest assured, the works are still covered by copyright law, and they are also digital, online, free of charge. And most importantly, the majority of open access work still focus on peer review, because that is the hallmark of scholarship. Next slide, please. So just to assure you, these are some of the things you won't lose if you publish on open access, right? They also provide copyright. They also provide peer review. In some cases, for example, the journal that I am editor of, the journal, when it makes a profit, the funds are channeled back to support the running of the journal. And there's still print versions available. You don't have to worry that you won't see a print version anymore. The prestige is there, and then all the work that you publish can still be considered for career advancement, and so on and so forth. Now, if we look at in the next slide, you can see that there's a huge, unprecedented volume and growth in the number of articles being published. And with so much available, it's very difficult to stand out. Of course, making it open access and available is one of the ways, right? But it cannot suffer at the compromise of having lower quality, for instance. However, even though we have got so much of all these, if you look at the next slide, please. The problem is, how do you get people to read your work? Now, remember the first point I raised, and that is doing research is to make the world a better place. But if nobody reads your work, nobody's going to get to use your knowledge, then it's not going to be very helpful, is it? So how do we stand up among all these? And to make things worse, access to all these journals is not necessarily straightforward. So in the next slide, please. Yeah. You can see that nearly 50% of all the kinds of content that are indexed comes from all these top 5 publishers. In the next slide, you will see that I have done a little bit of analysis also for those in the humanities. And this is just did it a couple of weeks ago, are still in the top 5 in Taylor and Francis, Sage, Springer, Wiley, and Elsevier. Of course, you've got Cambridge University Press among that as well. What about the social sciences? Let's look at the social sciences in the next slide. Again, Taylor and Francis, Sage, Cambridge University Press, Wiley, Springer Nature, Elsevier. So they are the big players, as it were, in publications. And therefore, the question is, how do we then allow other scholars to access your work? And I think that's paramount or important, really. In the next slide, we can see that there are some challenges to open access. Firstly, the problem is that libraries around the world, universities around the world are facing budget constraints. And the kinds of journal that you get from Elsevier, Springer, Taylor and Francis and all that comes on a subscription basis. While each journal is rather reasonably priced, right, for a university, but taking into consideration all the journal titles that a university has to curate, it can be a very big budget. And in my own university, for example, I sit on the university library committee. We have always been thinking about what are some of the necessary journal titles and what are some titles that's good to have. And we always have to balance between demand as well as budget. And it's not easy. The pricing for these publications have also gone up. And it's really, how do we make use of the current opportunities of increasing access through the internet, building on the connectivity that it potentially opens for scholars. So that's why open access is something that is a way to go for research, and in particular in the humanities and the social sciences. If you look at the data that I've collected here using the DOAJ as well as Open Door, you find that there are already as many as 15,000 open access journals across 134 countries, and there are other open access repositories that we can use. Many universities around the world have already mandated what we call open access depositories. So in my university, for instance, all published works have to be deposited into our digital repository. While some of these are copyright protected because of the commercial commercial publishers we use, what we would require, and depending on the policy of these journals, would be for our faculty to deposit what we call postprints or even preprints. Let's look at the next slide. Let me now focus on the importance of open access for humanities and social sciences research. And if I could elaborate a little bit more from my vantage point of geography education, because it sits right at the intersection of the humanities, the earth sciences, and social sciences. I like to frame the importance of open access using an example below. So let's look at the next slide. The global pandemic has been raised by the previous panelists and how it's impacted certain ways that discourses have changed in academia. But there are more pragmatic reasons for looking at how the pandemic has changed the world. And coming from a place of geography education, I naturally refer to the UN, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Just looking at any of these sustainable development goals, and not just good health and well-being at its center, but looking at how it would impact, say, quality education, food, energy, climate action, etc. The global pandemic has resulted in an increased demand on the research in these areas. And while we still value a lot of science, engineering, technology, mathematical kinds of research that could help us innovate in the ways that we productize and in the processes that we could use resources in our society and economy, a large part of understanding how the impact of the global pandemic is on society and economy will be coming from research in humanities and the social sciences. And given the rapidity and the kinds of changes that are happening with the pandemic, our work needs to go out to the public quicker, and it needs to go out to more people. So an example is that when everyone was talking about, with the global pandemic, we could go online, right? If schools are closed, we could get students to learn online, but we don't recognize, for example, the unevenness, right, that happens around the world. And in some places, students may not even get internet access. So in the OECD, for example, there are countries that have as little as 40 to 50% students with 40 to 50% access to a place to study outside of the school. And similarly, about 30% or so of this same group of students have no access to the internet. So when we look at all these variability, research into these kinds of phenomena in society needs to get out to practitioners and policymakers faster. And open access is a way to ensure that we gain this greater visibility and that we have greater impact so that we can promote, and I highlight the second bullet point here, more progress through speed, productivity, and knowledge translation. I think it also allows us to share work in the interest of public goods. So if you look at the trend in open access in humanities, it's going up, the blue bars. Next slide, it's fine, I'm catching up with your clicking, don't worry. Click the next slide as well, and the trend in the social sciences. Similarly, you see a growth, a trend there. Now, what are these implications of the growth then for us as scholars? Let's look at the next slide. It's a title placeholder. Let's click to the next slide. I think we want to make sure that our work is noticed, that it's available, we can share. So make sure that we index it through Google Scholar, ORCID, and other internet search tools as well. But we need to also make sure that we are not tempted. So in the next slide, I talk about research quality. Sometimes there are a lot of temptations out there in the internet with open access. And it's very hard to discern, for example. So next slide. It's very tempting for what we call ECR, early career researchers, to pay predatory publishers a article processing fee. I think we must be very mindful that we check the review process and that it is a reputable journal that has got a reputable editor board and so forth. Now, although the Beals list, as we know it, is now been removed because it has been criticized and so forth, many scholars still refer to some kind of an archive list somewhere as a first cut. For example, MDPI has raised a lot of issues with Beals list. I'm not suggesting that we follow the list carefully, but I think we all as scholars have a responsibility to make sure that we check the authenticity of the publishers, the review process, if there are any other comments from other users of the journal, etc. And very importantly, to understand what the policies of the journal are, look at the editorial board and so forth. So let's skip 2 slides next about the article. Yep, I'm getting there, only 5 slides more. Let's skip 2 slides. Here, the article processing fee may seem pricey at first, but a lot of the universities are encouraging researchers to put this into their budgets when they put in their research grant. And there are also other alternatives. Next slide. There are some journals that provide what we call green access. Next slide. So in the journal that I'm editor of, for instance, we allow our authors to use the preprints and which is before they go into publication, the preprints to be used for up to a period of 16 months. After that, we embargo for 16 months, and after that, authors can put their preprints onto repositories. This could include ResearchGate or LinkedIn. So check again with the journal's policy when it comes to this. In the next slide, I will showcase my university's digital repository, where we require all our faculty to put in their published research. And I think it's really important to keep ahead and keep abreast. So in the next 2 slides, you will see that we regularly organize talks on open access. One more slide. And this is happening just next week. Okay, so some concluding remarks before I end off. I think for humanities and social sciences research, our difficulty is, how do we reach a wider pool of readers amongst so many other published works and set against a landscape whereby there are very pricey journals that needs to be subscribed to. Open access is one of the ways, but there are also pitfalls. We have to make sure that we check and ensure that we do not fall into any trap. And I like to end off by offering a very small anecdote or story. As humanities and social science researchers like you and I, we often are focused in our own areas of work, and we need to look beyond. So if you think of this anecdote I'm going to share of the elephant and the 6 blind people, 6 blind people were led up to a huge elephant which they've never encountered in their lives. And the first one touched the legs and say, oh, it's a tree because it feels like a trunk of a tree. The second one touched the tail and say, oh, this is a mighty snake because it was touching its tail. And the other one touched the body of the elephant and say, this is a wall, right? I think the rest of the story is quite clear. Person touching the ears would think it's a leaf, touching the trunk would think it's a hose and so forth. But we should not lose sight of the overall picture. And essentially, if these 6 blind people communicated with each other, I think they could discover even something bigger. So I would put this call out to all researchers to think seriously about getting your work more noticed. Going through open access is one way, but the reason why we're doing this is to make sure that we can make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chang. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's give virtual applause for both keynote speakers. Thank you so much. Well, now it's time for Q&A session. If you have any question, once again, please write down in the chat box by mentioning your name, to whom are you going to ask the question, and ask the question. We have one question here from Mr. Idris. The question is for Professor Chang. In humanities and social sciences research, most people assume that they get difficulties in publishing the paper. One reason is because most of the research conducted by qualitative method, in which the journal expects for the quantitative at most. What do you think about it? Is there any tips or tricks about it?
Okay, you could start by publishing in my journal. We accept qualitative research. That might be good to hear, okay? But I think it's very important for us researchers to do our homework, check on the scopes and aims of the journals that you are interested to publish in, read some past issues and see if they do accept these kinds of traditions, right? Qualitative traditions. I think increasingly, because I'm also serving on several other editorial boards, I also see a lot more works in the qualitative traditions being recognized and being accepted. And in fact, I don't think we should be discouraged just because we think that qualitative research is not accepted. So do our homework. I think we should be fine there.
Okay, so for Mr. Idris, probably you can start by checking the scopes and aims of journal managed by Professor Chang. What is the name of the journal, excuse me?
It's the International Research in Geographical and Environmental Education.
Okay, so it's about geography and environmental education then, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Let me type it into the chat.
Okay, sure, thank you. Wait, let's go to Dr. Alif. Dr. Alif, you have mentioned about how the pandemic has changed and has emerged several new terms like the infodemic, colonials, COVID, and some others. While you mentioned that in the project done by your students, there are several types of projects, right? It's not only about news or health, but there are also things about social media, animation, cartoon, and movies. Are there any changes in the other types of objects being translated here besides health?
I think even the word social distancing, they don't, in Arabic, it's rendered as, for example, it's rendered as a tabaud, الاجتماعي. Actually, that word is quite it sounds alien for the current generation, but it has become a new normal in the Arab world as well. Even some words like corona is not really commonly used word in Arabic, but it's borrowed, and it becomes a new normal in the Arab world.
Yeah, so we're not only talking about English, everyone, we're talking about some other second language.
And even in Malay, it's like penjarakan social. It sounds weird for this generation, because even the word penjarakan was discussed whether it's double K or with 1K, but I think that most people agree to spell it with 1K instead of 2K. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go back to Professor Chang. You have mentioned some suggestions for us as the researcher of how to publish our research results in open access journals, right? Well, many of us here are also journal managers. Probably, do you have any suggestions or things that we should do to make our journals better, besides having the open access?
I think there are two other things that journal editors and managers can think about in terms of visibility. One is, of course, getting your journal indexed in traditional indices. And the other one is getting your journals recognized on non-traditional channels. So in terms of the traditional channels, we can go to SCI, Scopus, etc. But I think you've got to work really hard with these organizations to see how you could get your journals indexed. It's not easy. Sometimes they put different criteria, and these various criteria may or may not work for the context of your journal. But fear not, there are also other non-traditional channels, and I refer to social media in this case. So start a Twitter, start a Facebook account for your journal. Post regular updates of interesting articles that have been published. I've done that in the past, not been doing it that recently, but once you post some of these interesting articles, it gets spread by word of mouth. So people would cite you and repost, tag you, retweet. So it is worth it putting in some effort to have some social media presence. So these are two ways, of course. One, just to repeat, formal channels, right, to get it indexed and get visible. The other one is through social media.
Yeah, okay. So getting it indexed and then promoting it through social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other media. Okay, thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, because time is up for this parallel plenary session, then once again, let's give applause for the first two keynote speakers here, Dr. Alif and Professor Chang. Thank you so much to Dr. Alif and Professor Chang. It's a very, very interesting and engaging discussion. We all learn a lot from this, whether it's about translation or about broadening our knowledge on research publication, because open access allows our work to have greater visibility. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, let's have a break for 5 minutes before we go to the next plenary session. In the next plenary session, we're going to have the other two keynote speakers. We have Professor Yazid Bastomi from Faculty of Letters, Universitas Negeri Malang, and we have Associate Professor Haris Abdul Wahab from University of Malaya, Malaysia. Before that, let's have a break for 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Now we're going to move to the plenary session 2. As I told you earlier, this session we're going to have two other amazing speakers. The first one is Associate Professor Haris Abdul Wahab from University of Malaya, Malaysia. And then the second one is Professor Yazid Bastomi from Universitas Negeri Malang. Associate Professor Haris Abdul Wahab, are you here with us already? Professor Haris?
Hi, Assalamualaikum and good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's really clear. The operator, could you please show us the CV? Professor Harris will present a paper entitled On Reciprocity, Breaking Down the Role of Researchers from a Conceptual Reflection. Conceptual here is conceptual plus empirical, another blending word. We've talked about so many blending words in the earlier session, and now there's conceptual. Operator, could you please show the CV? So we have talked about how we published our research in open access journal, and now we're going to listen to the role of researchers from conceptual reflection. Well, Associate Professor Haris Abdul Wahab is a faculty member in Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Malaya, Malaysia. The academic qualification for the bachelor and master degree he pursued it in University of Putra, Malaysia, and for the doctoral degree in University of Malaya. The areas of expertise, social sciences and social work that includes community development, community work, and human development. The recent publication, the first one is Volunteering as Praxis During COVID-19. So it's very recent because we can see the word COVID-19 there. Experience from Bangladeshi migrant workers in Malaysia and indigenous communities of Bangladesh. The second one, the role of social entrepreneurship for youth purpose development in Journal of Asian Public Policy. Well, Professor Harris, time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and very good morning. Thank you very much to organizer for inviting me as a speaker in this available and timely seminar focusing on marginal community. So today I'm Haris Abdul Wahab from Department of Social Administration and Justice with my team. Actually, this project with my team, Mr. Jahid Siraj and Dr. Muhammad Rashid. Our project in Bangladesh actually with the marginal community or Rakhine community. But until now, we need to hold the project because of the pandemic. But the project is still running. So my presentation today basically based on this project, but I not really go deeper into that project. I will touch only one thing of the project. It's about reciprocity. As a researcher, we need to realize that the importance of the role of researcher from the conceptual as a reflection as a researcher, especially when we're working with the indigenous or marginal community. This is my teamwork. I'm Mr. Jahid Siraj and Dr. Muhammad Rashid. That's my team on this project. And this project is still on, but we need to hold because of the pandemic. We cannot go to the area location. So next slide, please. My topic is actually given to me is a marginalized community. So we need to understand basically what is a marginalized. You can read anywhere what is mean by marginalized community. From here, I refer to a few sources for a definition of marginalized community. So based on that, I conclude that marginalized community or group refer to any category of people who have certain disadvantage and obstacle internally or externally based on the perception, mind, value, and other motivation behavior. So that's basically based on the definition given by another definition. Maybe I quote from the dictionary. We say that Collin Dictionary. We say that that's if you describe people as a marginal, you mean that they are not involved in significant event or development in society because they are poor or powerless. Another definition, you can get it from Sage Encyclopedia of Qualitative Research Method, reveal that marginalized population or marginalized community are those excluded from mainstream social, economic, cultural, or political life. As an example of marginalized community is exclude, but not by limited the group exclude race, religion, political, or culture. As beside that, when we talk about marginalized community, we cannot run from the another concept. We must understand concept of social exclusion, social isolation, and social deprivation, and also alienation. This concept will describe what that's meant by the cause or effect by the marginalized community. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. The type of marginal group or marginal community. There's basically this type is based on Malaysian situation. I take it from the Malaysian situation. Maybe different from other country or another country. Maybe Indonesia, Singapore, and another country have another type of marginal community or groups. In Malaysia, we can divide marginal community into a few type of group. Is firstly, we call it minority group. Okay, minority group is a social group that is relatively small in membership compared to main or majority group in the society. Physical isolated group. This physical isolated individual who tend to be socially excluded, composed of those who live in remote geographic location, usually in rural area. For instance, in Malaysia, we have like orang asli. I'm not sure in Indonesia have this group. Maybe you can please keep the same slide before. No need to move to another slide. Okay, this one. Okay, protected group, poor group, the squatter community, the handicapped, the single family, former psychiatric patient, former detainees, former drug addicts, institutionalized individual, the gender ambiguous, victim of crime, and non-citizen. These are basically the type of marginal group based in Malaysia. Maybe in other country or in Indonesia also have another or different group of minority or marginal community groups. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. The aim of this presentation is, this discussion is to an unorthodox paper about reciprocity. As a researcher, the role of researcher, social science researcher, what is the reciprocity about? Okay. Okay, next slide. So this slide focus on what, why, and how. What is reciprocity? Why is reciprocity important in the social science researcher, especially with the marginalized group, and how reciprocity can be a means to empower the community or marginal people or marginal group. On what? What was the mean to reciprocity in classical texts since the conception of Saint Augustine described to the Western social science? Why? Why this very important? Why reciprocity is important for the marginalized or marginal community, and how reciprocity can be meant to empower the community marginal or marginal people. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is very important when we talk about reciprocity. There's a basic, we call it a theoretical theory of knowledge, guiding framework. From my discussion based on this theory of knowledge, guiding framework. This tree is given us the whole picture of my discussion. Our discussion, we are providing the root reasoning for debate that is well often called analytical framework, conceptual guideline. The topic of the branch of the tree will be in following conversation, so I am not giving a detail of each. Here we follow a medieval philosopher view on the theory of knowledge, how we gather, share, and experience in and with knowledge. Okay. Based on Sadian Gao, they divide this source of knowledge into four. We call it sensation, nouns, necessity, and reliable tradition. What does mean by sensation? Sensation is about taking of our compass, mean of sensation, not yelling on feeling or feeling. This is a significant Greek root tradition. Okay, nouns refer to which is give us or our direct knowledge is called by Sadia akal. Okay, which is a translate to the term nouns used by Aristotle to indicate the faculty or immediate cognition in distinct from logos, and also tabuna or understanding is also designed by other expansion, meaning principle of knowledge and discriminant. Okay, necessity is a term in the compass refer to Shiraz. It said that man must first know that, reflect, and discern, and then believe. Let us take from the Sound Gao, based on the tree analysis. They have a few steps in this body of knowledge. First is a proof of speech. Speech is sound, and sound is of many kinds. The second is about we limited sound of inanimate thing, then third sound of irrational animal for natural human sound, sound of single letter and single word, combination of word which we are not complete sentence, and necessary impossible proportion of required proof living. Okay. Tradition is the post source assimilated with the Islamic tradition and the central theology understanding. There's about okay, slide. Okay, this slide, meaning of reciprocity. What? Meaning of reciprocity. We can get the meaning and the definition given by scholar about the reciprocity. The law of meaning given here, I just list here. You can read that, the meaning given by this. Okay. Reciprocity is not new, even since modern society or modern Western philosophy apparent, and those are rooted in Augustine. We can read their basic. Okay. West have been trying to do something by reciprocity in kind that Augustine asserted in 6th stage of social development or the city of good. This 6th stage legacy was the world to world reappeared in 1916 by Rostow. In 1960, then by feminists, when the role of researcher has been integrated till the 1990, we see multiple implication for the reciprocity. This table show that how that progress of the reciprocity in body of knowledge. So we pick up two reasoning to discuss about reciprocity on the slide before the slide 5. So why reciprocity? Reciprocity based on that. Based on Carlos, he said, once again, I repeat that I am not an impartial objective critic. So this based on why reciprocity, based on this slide. Frankfurt also, scholar also give the why reciprocity. Okay. 4 dimension of research as reciprocity is there's a mover from why to how. So reciprocity here mean as a spirit, as an insanic actor, and as knowledge democracy. As a spirit, as for spirit, we borrow from ancient Indian yogi script. We call it first is about mindset. How? Mindset. Organizing the mindset to the mutual way of knowing by maintaining an unwavering and maintaining a little confidence in yourself together with the people. In past, as soon as we can coordinate our thinking, our perception, way of being, and emotion channel in the direction of the aim that we mean to accomplish in our study path. The third one is consciousness. Again, the form of being and understanding together with our emotion are translated, and then are non-destructive emotion like the Western searcher that interrupt our information strategy to our energy flow in the direction of our aim be reciprocal. What is about body? Whenever our consciousness, feeling, and energy, that's it. That is form of being and knowing the same direction. Our body action tend to be arranged in the same description as an insan, as a good. The good deed when all our element have pure in one direction. Community empowerment, harmony, and their privilege, everything become transparent to us, and we can manifest outside. This is a researcher. Okay. Next. As an insani. Okay, this is another part of why, how the reciprocity can be implemented in our research as an insani. Our motivation is from Islamic perspective. Our motivation is from the Holy Quran. Is there any reward for insan good other than good? That's from Surah Ar-Rahman. Okay. One from Western Justice in product for Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, John Dewey, and John Rao. These are about justice. We call insanic from the justice perspective. We can read from Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, John Dewey, and John Rao. There's the circle from John Bentham to Mill to Dewey to Rao. The historical production of utilitarianism derived from conceptualism. To Western justice in dominant by Amartya Sen, purchase choice, capability, approach are nothing but a reflecting of development as freedom. 3. Reason distribute before this, okay. Slide before, okay. Okay. Okay, that's about insight, and the third one is a component of the how reciprocity is about knowledge democracy. One representative of indigenous Australian from the Bangladesh are not neutral, but privileged by reason based on hierarchical heritage root in background. Okay, there's a 2 is a knowledge democratic standing against the suspicious knowledge explore of indigenous knowledge. Okay, the third one is knowledge democracy is about open access for the sharing of knowledge so that every need knowledge we have access to it. Knowledge democracy is about intentional linking of justice, fairness, and action to process of using knowledge. Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, that's our location or our site of our study. There's a Bangladesh and the hill tract. There's a Chittagong hill tract, and there's a Rakhine communities there. There's 5% of the population is 5% of total population. There's and they live in total 10% of the total land in Bangladesh. There's about location. You can see the geography area. There's our project or study based on that. But like I tell you before this, that we need to postpone because of pandemic, so we cannot go to that location until the pandemic is over. So the project is a whole. That's a reflection based on our discussion before this. You can see here. It's about observe nature with a great heart. Our sky and tree has a forest. Listen to them. Dear son, watch your surrounding. Nothing is specially for you, but watch them bestow us. Okay, next slide. That's our just only reflection for based on our first or primary visit to the location. Okay, that's how we try to make a conversation by applying the concept of reciprocal with the Rakhine community based on the bioprospecting project. That's my conversation and my group conversation. That's an example I give it here. How we try to comply with the concept, the principle of the reciprocity. So to make sure that marginalized community or indigenous community rely that we not only try to get something from them, but we try to give them back something based on our project. Okay, that's very that's a root of reciprocity is giving back to the community. What we get, we giving back to the community. Okay, that's only example how we try to apply the principle of reciprocity when we are working with the indigenous or marginal community in Bangladesh, Rakhine community.
Excuse me, Prof. There is 5 minutes left.
Okay, I will try to finish my presentation. Okay, there's based on in our bioprospecting project, we are aim to pattern the medicine knowledge under the community people. Maybe we change the world after side down, however, and our practice and engage with and within the people. That's our aim. Based on that project, we try to pattern the we call it IMK, Indigenous Medicine Practice, or IMK, Indigenous medicine knowledge with the community. We try to pattern that. We try to giving back to the community. Okay, that's all my presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's give applause, the virtual clap for Farid. If you have any question, once again, please write it down in the chat box. And please be patient because we need to listen to another presentation by Professor Yazid Bastomi from Universitas Negeri Malang. Pak Yazid, are you with us?
Yes, Rahmati. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can you hear me clearly?
The operator, could you please show us the CV of Professor Yazid? Yeah. Professor Dr. Yazid Bastomi from Faculty of Letters, Universitas Negeri Malang. Next slide, please. Okay, the academic qualification, BA from IKIP Malang. So back then, Universitas Negeri Malang is IKIP Malang. So the bachelor degree was in IKIP Malang. And then for the MA in Curtin University of Technology, Australia. And for the doctoral degree or PhD from Universitas Negeri Malang, Indonesia. The areas of expertise is in applied linguistics, discourse analysis, contrastive rhetoric, and intercultural education. The recent projects, the first one is reflective practice on lesson planning among EABL teacher educators. The second one, integrating Islamic knowledge into multimedia-based supplementary listening materials. The second one is with me too. The third one, patterns of the teaching and learning cycle of GBA by EFL teachers in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Yazid is going to present a paper entitled Unexpected Expectations, a Cultural Observation. So it's a very interesting title, yeah? It's a witty exploitation of words, I think, unexpected expectations. Well, Professor Yazid, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Rahmati. So I'm not, you're helping me with the, all right, thank you very much for helping me with the slide sharing. Okay, that is my title, Unexpected Expectations, a Cultural Observation. Would you please move to the second slide? Next slide, please. Well, I'm going to make a very quick presentation of, well, my presentation basically addresses some issues around academic culture within the context of an Indonesian university, particularly my own university. And recently I've been involved in the revision of a house-made writing style guide in my university, which has been implicated by the new governmental policy, which has to do with the academic text, including that of undergraduate thesis. So within this context, my presentation will talk about my experience in reading academic texts written in English by my supervisees and academic texts written in Bahasa Indonesia or in Indonesian. So my reading of the academic texts within my own university context results in my leverage in attending, back to slide 3, please. Deliberations, in attending, having deliberations as part of the process of revising the house-made writing style guide. So, well, what is the status of, okay, previous slide, please. Slide sebelumnya, slide 3. Okay, thank you. Well, I think I'm having conversation actually with people probably from outside of Indonesia. So I've got that question whether undergraduate thesis writing in your country is obligatory or what? Okay, next slide. Well, in Indonesia, it tends to be obligatory because by regulation, thesis writing for undergraduate students actually optional. Sorry, that is optional actually, but well, the other option being final project, but in practice, it tends to be obligatory. So probably you wonder why. Well, each university has its own policy regarding undergraduate thesis writing, I believe. And in most American universities, to the best of my knowledge, undergraduate thesis writing is not obligatory, but they also encourage the undergraduate students to experience research. And some similarities about undergraduate research can also be identified in other regions, such as Europe and other places. So the situation is different from that of Indonesia, of course. And we in Indonesia tend to see undergraduate thesis writing as obligatory, even though the national policy gives us some kind of option. So probably, as I said before, the pertinent question is why? Well, in my own observation, the answer is that the consequence of backwash effect, I think. That is the consequence of backwash effect that has been in place in Indonesia. So the job market particularly tends to give more privilege to those graduates having experience of undergraduate thesis writing. So that's why there is a decision on having thesis writing for undergraduate students as obligatory. All right. Let me have another question. Saying the writing of undergraduate, master's, and doctoral theses is the same. Well, it seems that nobody would answer. Well, since those terms indicate levels, many would believe that the writing of these theses of different levels of education will also be different. Of course, this is quite understandable, but well, I agree with what has been said in his book by Gary Thomas, stating that despite the different levels, the writing of the theses of different levels, undergraduate, master's, and doctoral, is actually in principle the same. So I also agree with this. Next slide, please. Okay, well, in the Indonesian context, stipulated in the government policy, the writing of a master's thesis is projected to be published in nationally accredited journals, whereas the doctoral thesis is projected to be publishable in internationally reputed journals. So there was a previous talk about publication, whether it is in conventionally managed journals or the new platform of journal publication. Well, of course, there are some issues surfacing out of these kind of practices. And I think to some extent this is relevant. I mean, my topic a little bit relevant to the previous presentation. Okay, would you please move to slide 7, the next slide, please. And back to my involvement in the revision of the house-made writing style guide. Well, I prepared something as I was involved in the commission team. I tried to download writing style guides downloadable from a number of Indonesian universities. And at that time, I managed to download some 21 writing style guides from some 21 different Indonesian universities. So you may check the table there, what I found. So I tried to, well, I was using NCON software, concordance software at the time, and I searched for the word gap. It has demonstrated 2 occurrences, and of the 2 occurrences, one is in the introduction and the other is in literature review. And the search for kebaruan in bahasa Indonesia means a novelty, kebaruan, which means novelty, has shown no hit at all. Kesenjangan, which means gap, reveal 4 hits, 3 related to literature review and 1 in the abstract of the writing style. And when I search the word originalitas or originality, Well, that disclosed 41 hits. All of which dealing with originality in a juxtaposition with plagiarism, without any reference to, back to the previous slide, without reference to novelty. So the search for original, having affinity to novelty has found 3 hits. And the search for significant or significance in English has led to 9 hits, all of which do not relate to the significance of research in general, but relational significance of variables as those in statistics. So therefore, this piece of information made up one of my agenda and as one of the team members in revising the meta genre. I would refer to this writing style guide as a meta genre shaping other genres, particularly academic writing genre. Okay, the next slide, please. Yes. Now, as a member of the commission team, I also leverage on my previous corpus. Wait, slide 8, Mas. So I also leverage on my previous corpus research. We in the research group on linguistics have had some research projects on building corpora. Number 1 is corpus of State Universitas Malang Indonesian Learners English, which we abbreviated into CSMILE, and corpus of Indonesian texts in academia, Cinta. I believe people speaking Malay understand the word Cinta, that means literally love, and we use that to represent corpus of Indonesian texts in academia. Next slide. CSMILE has amounted to, next slide, please. So CSMILE has amounted to about 7 million words, and this corpus is composed of 426 undergraduate theses written in English by our undergraduate students, majoring in English language teaching, English language and literature, English linguistics, around those majors. Next slide. The next slide is about Cinta. And Cinta has amounted to about 2.5 million words and is still in the process of expanding. And currently we also have a project on that. We are currently working on that. So adding with more texts or data to collect. And this is understandable because the majority of our undergraduate theses are actually written in Indonesian or in Bahasa Indonesia. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. Our analysis of the 2 corpora, CSMILE and Cinta, yes, has led us to some understanding about Indonesian students' tendency in their academic writing. And I believe this also indicates our cultural predilection. I mean, yeah, the tendency of the students to probably unconsciously to represent their cultural orientations. So as the table shows, Indonesian students tend to use the words the researcher or the researchers to refer to the writer, while particularly in undergraduate thesis, that is singular, the word researcher referring to the writer of the thesis instead of I. So the use of the researcher has the biggest frequency of about, you can see on the table, in the table there, about 90% compared to other terms, author or writer. So none has shown the use of I thus far, based on our corpus of CSMILE particularly. Next slide. So, talking about the consequence, I mean, the consequence of my understanding based on the result of my analysis, then in the revision of the writing style guide, I suggested the change of that point. So previously it was stipulated in the writer, that the writer of the thesis had to use third-person approach So they should they had to use researcher. That is the translation of the word peneliti. So personally, I also, and so I asked, as the member of the commission team, then I proposed that. So we need to make it open. So I strongly asked the revision of the previous statement that the thesis writer has to use third person point of view. And I also brought that issue to the class. I mean, I've brought that issue to the class for the attentions of my students. Next. Another point that I've observed in the two corpora, Sismail and Cinta, and in my experience as a supervisor, is that the text writers tend to use, I mean, Indonesian text writers, Indonesian academics, I mean, my students particularly, tend to present definitions a lot in the introductory part. Their academic texts, their theses, their articles, I mean, research articles. So the use of the definitions to me sound like the academic text of, as if the academic text of theses or articles are like introductory course books for undergraduate students, because it is, well, crowded with definitions, presentations of definitions, not really about argumentations. So there is a tendency that the students writing sounds quite, what do you call, reader responsible instead of writer responsible. So the connections of the definitions seems to be expected to be leading to argumentations, but actually the argumentations are nil there or absent. Most of the time, the introductory parts are full with simple definitions. I mean, simply with definitions, which are not really helpful for the argumentation building. Okay, next slide. So in the revision of the writing style guide, we changed our explanation of what is meant by introduction or background in the academic texts of theses or papers or articles. So the explanation, the new explanation in our writing style guide focuses on the need to critically review relevant and up-to-date previous studies to contextualize the proposed or given topic of research and identify research gap in the body of knowledge as represented or demonstrated by previous studies. So that is the way how I joined the commission team to revise the writing style guide. So I also have brought this issue to the attention of my students as well in my classes. Okay, next slide. So another issue you've seen in the corpora, particularly in Cinta and Sisma, is that the tendency of the student writers in using expressions of expectation. So this is another issue. So as is clear in the table, next slide. So as is clear in the table, many of the expectations in both corpora are not well supported or hollow expectations. We refer to unsupported expectations here as hollow expectations. So if you check the number, the hollow expectations is much bigger. In C-Smile, that is somewhat smaller compared to those in Cinta, even though the total number of the words is actually bigger in C-Smile, but the availability of hollow expectations is bigger in Cinta, in the Indonesian text of Indonesian text of Cinta, Corpus of Indonesian Text in Academia. Okay, but all in all, there is a strong tendency that Indonesian students tend to express hollow expectations or unsupported expectations. Next slide, please. In the next slide, we've got examples of well-supported expectations. Next slide, slide 17, please. But the majority are like the example in the following slide. Now, okay, let's have these examples. In this slide, we've got these examples, two examples here. Therefore, the findings of this study did not support the theory from both Hamada and Kuramoto. The teacher was expected to include the steps of reading, blah, blah, blah. It has some kind of immediate support related to the expression of the expectation here. Now, that is also true with the next example here. It has the immediate support for the expression of the expectation here. Now let's move to the next slide. Okay, this is an example of unsupported expectation. So this study is expected to be beneficial for the textbook writers to write better quality textbook. Well, our understanding of this, it doesn't have any immediate support for the expression of this expectation. In other words, anybody may express this kind of expectation that this study is expected to be blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Indonesian audience may be familiar with the example of a video available in YouTube about the new policy on Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja from the government side. There was an explanation related to the Undang-Undang there. And if you find that, what do you call that, that video, you will find quite a number of the use of Undang-Undang ini diharapkan, Undang-Undang ini diharapkan, Undang-Undang ini diharapkan. So that kind of frequency of the use of diharapkan, diharapkan does not necessarily relate to the immediate support, showing the logic why we need to have that kind of expectation. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, okay. Comparing with other corporate academic research texts by native speakers of English. So we tried to compare CSMILE. I mentioned CSMILE, but we haven't got the time to compare Cinta, but we compared CSMILE with other corpora of MICAS, that is from the University of Michigan, and also BAWE. We found that the number of the hollow expectations is really huge in CSMILE, that is about 95%, close to 95%. Whereas in MICAS, close to 9%, and then in BAWE, that's close to 3%. So comparing percentages, we can see that that is really huge in CSMILE. So the whole expectations is quite strong. So all in all, I feel that many of the students, I mean, the Indonesian students' expectations in their academic texts are actually not expected. So that's why the title of my presentation is Unexpected Expectations. So this brings to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Over back to you, Rahmati.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yazid. So in the end of the presentation, we know the reason why the title is Unexpected Expectations. So it's about how the Indonesians write their thesis or their academic article. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I remind you again, if you have any questions, write it down in the chat box or in the Q&A. Well, still talking about the thesis or in undergraduate thesis, master thesis, or dissertation in other countries, is there a kind of obligations for this kind of thesis writing or dissertation writing is a must, I think. But for undergraduate or master thesis, is it a must? Probably there are audience from other countries that wants to answer. But yes, it's an inquiry here. What about Professor Harris? Probably you want to share about the thesis writing in your faculty.
Pardon, please.
No, we are talking about the undergraduate thesis writing and the master's thesis writing.
Okay.
In your faculty in University of Malaya, is it obligatory for undergraduate students and master students to write thesis?
Yes, in our university, especially in faculty, based on faculty art and social science, we have we call it academic exercise for undergraduate. Academic exercise or project paper for undergraduate. That's compulsory for every program, compulsory for our undergraduate to write exercise project. That's a small as a to basically this in final semester or final year student. So they need to write a project paper or academic writing, academic exercise for their program. And for the master, it's depend of the mode of the study, whether it's based on research. If based on research, it's compulsory. You need to provide a thesis or we call it dissertation for that. And for the we call it mode mixed mode or between subject and thesis. Yes, we also need a student to provide or write academic writing like thesis and dissertation. Yes, it's compulsory also. And based on that, for the master student, like that, we need before they submit the thesis, they need to publish their in the article journal or in a book chapter based on their thesis writing. There's I think now is at least one publication based on the thesis writing.
Okay, thank you. Well, it seems that there is no question from the audience here for both. Oh, wait, we have one question from Dr. Joko Sayono to Professor Harris. In the context of reciprocity in classical texts, what is the methodology that you used? As we know in general, for example, hermeneutic as one of the tools of analysis in the textual studies. What do you think about it?
Actually, when we talk about a methodology, we try to, we call it indigenous methodology. Maybe some people, some researchers cannot accept this methodology, but for the, especially for the people who come the background of anthropology or social anthropology, we know that's another methodology is called it indigenous methodology paradigm. So based on that, reciprocity is one part of the indigenous methodology. So that's another thing we need to think about indigenous methodology. Some people say there's not we call it, it's not empirical, it's not we call it systematic, but some people recognize this there's one of the methodology in research.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Harris. I think that answered the question. There is no more question. Ladies and gentlemen, we've learned a lot about reciprocity from Prof. Harris' presentation and from Pak Yazid's presentations. We've learned a lot about Indonesian people style in writing, the common style, in what actually that we need to revise to make it more international. Thank you so much. Let's give applause once again for both presenters. Virtual clap, everyone. Well, that's all for today's plenary session. Thank you for joining us in today's conference, and I give it back to the MC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rahmati Putrianavari, for helping us to lead the plenary session. That's such a vivid and interesting discussion. We learned a lot about from this discussion about innovation, education, and also open access. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of today's agenda. It was a pleasure for me, Hauki Ranalia, to be given the opportunity to host this special event. I do apologize for the mistake in presenting this event. Thank you very much for the speakers, moderators, committees, and participants. Before we end today's agenda, I would like to inform to all participants to stay in the room because the committees will give some information about the panel room and the presence link. Thank you very much and see you in International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2022. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Universitas Negeri Malang adalah salah satu universitas yang melaksanakan pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakat terbaik di Indonesia. UM konsisten berada dalam jajaran perguruan tinggi terbaik di Indonesia selama bertahun-tahun. UM masuk perguruan tinggi terbaik di Indonesia tahun 2018. Versi Kemenristek Dikti dan Foraisiu membuktikan kualitas UM sebagai perguruan tinggi yang unggul dan menjadi rujukan tak perlu diragukan lagi. Melalui visi dan misi yang telah ditetapkan, UM menakbiskan diri sebagai The Learning University sejak 2009, di mana UM mengukuhkan jati dirinya sebagai learning organization dan learning resources terkemuka di Indonesia. 34.000 mahasiswa UM tersebar dalam berbagai program pendidikan berkualitas dan bereputasi tinggi mulai jenjang diploma hingga doktoral. Di antara ribuan mahasiswa UM tersebut, terdapat mahasiswa luar negeri dari berbagai negara yang tersebar dalam berbagai jurusan atau program studi dengan 46 program studi terakreditasi B dan 57 program studi terakreditasi A. Berdiri sejak 18 Oktober 1954 dengan nama Perguruan Tinggi Pendidikan Guru, bertransformasi menjadi UM sejak 4 Agustus 1999. Kampus utama UM dikelilingi oleh sarana pendidikan, rekreasi, olahraga, dan bisnis. Kampus 2 UM terletak tak jauh dari pintu masuk Kota Malang sebelah timur. Kampus 3 UM terletak tepat di gerbang masuk kawasan Heritage Makam Bung Karno di Kota Nan Asri, Blitar. Fakultas Ilmu Pendidikan, Fakultas Sastra, Fakultas Matematika dan Ilmu Pengetahuan Alam, Fakultas Ekonomi, Fakultas Teknik, Fakultas Ilmu Keolahragaan, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial, Fakultas Pendidikan Psikologi, Pasca Sarjana. Selain itu, UM juga menyelenggarakan kursus berbagai bidang keterampilan bagi masyarakat yang diwadahi dalam program pendidikan keterampilan otomotif, bisnis, teknologi informasi, dan industri. Dididik dan diampu oleh dosen yang berkualifikasi dan berkompetensi unggul di bidangnya, mahasiswa mendapatkan pengalaman belajar yang revolusioner dalam mengembangkan pemikiran yang kritis, berinovasi, dan berkarya dalam memecahkan masalah sesuai dengan disiplin ilmu yang ditekuni, sejalan dengan spirit UM yang cinta kreasi, inovasi, dan prestasi. Sejak tahun 2018, UM menerapkan kurikulum transdisipliner dan kurikulum berbasis kehidupan life-based learning. UM mewadahi pengembangan diri dan prestasi sesuai bakat dan minat mahasiswa melalui 34 UKM yang terbagi menjadi kelompok penalaran, kesenian, olahraga, kesejahteraan, kerohanian, dan minat khusus. UM senantiasa mengupayakan sarana penunjang akademik yang terbaik. Beberapa di antaranya ialah perpustakaan, masjid, fasilitas olahraga, dan gedung pertemuan yang representatif untuk kegiatan akademik maupun non-akademik. Selain itu, UM juga mempunyai pusat pengkajian Pancasila, poliklinik, peer counseling corner. Sebagai bentuk pengamalan terhadap Tridharma Perguruan Tinggi, UM telah memiliki 63 jurnal ilmiah yang telah terakreditasi nasional. Peningkatan jumlah publikasi dosen dan mahasiswa, serta melakukan pengabdian kepada masyarakat. UM terus melakukan kerjasama dengan berbagai pihak, baik kerjasama internasional maupun kerjasama nasional. Di antara wujud nyata kerjasama yang telah dilakukan yaitu proyek 4-in-1 antara UM dengan Islamic Development Bank (ISDB) berupa pembangunan 2 gedung kuliah bersama untuk menjadikan UM sebagai pusat unggulan dalam inovasi belajar. Sebagai institusi pendidikan yang telah eksis selama 64 tahun, UM telah mendidik dan mengabdi, menyiapkan generasi milenial untuk menjadi pemimpin masa depan, sekaligus mencetak generasi yang kontributif, kreatif, inovatif, dan peka terhadap perubahan.
UM senantiasa terus berkembang. Ke depan, UM berkomitmen untuk menjadi pusat unggulan dalam bidang inovasi belajar.
UM mampu memerankan diri sebagai sumber belajar, tempat belajar, dan inspirator pembelajaran bagi generasi muda.
UM merupakan kampus yang ramah dengan generasi milenial. Bersama UM, saya bisa berkembang.
UM bekerjasama membangun bangsa.
Universitas Negeri Malang senantiasa berkarya dan terus berkarya untuk bangsa. Bersama UM, kami belajar, meneliti, dan mengabdi untuk bumi pertiwi, memberikan kontribusi melalui gagasan dan karya nyata. Universitas Negeri Malang, The Learning University.